Welcome to the Pregnancy Help Podcast. I'm Christine Grimmett, and in this episode, you will be hearing from Tracie Shellhouse, the Vice President of Ministry Services here at Heartbeat, Danielle White, our General Counsel, Andrea Trudden, Vice President of Communications and Marketing, and Jor-El Godsey, the President of Heartbeat International. So before we get started with this conversation, I have a couple of quick things. And first of all, if you're not yet on the list to receive updates from Pregnancy Help News, I would encourage you to head over to pregnancyhelpnews.com for updates on what's happening in the world of pro-life pregnancy help. And if you subscribe, you'll receive those updates weekly directly into your inbox. And the second thing is for me to pass things off to Andrea Trudden for a quick message about this episode, because we actually recorded it a few months ago. And a few things have happened here around Heartbeat that we wanted to explain. And I think in light of this episode, it'll make a lot of sense and it'll be really helpful for the context. So Andrea, can you explain to listeners what has happened since our initial recording of this?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Christine. Yes, we knew that we needed to do a podcast about deceptive laws and deceptive advertising because of various things we were hearing around the nation. At the time, we recorded it, we were getting it all planned, and then the Attorney General of California decided to sue Heartbeat International, utilizing part of that deceptive advertising clause that we have had time to review the lawsuit. Connect with our friends at Thomas More Society, and honestly continue to stay the course, because what we are seeing now is more and more attorneys general across the nation, and then different arms of different government and politicians standing up and speaking out, using this rhetoric, using this the terminology about deceptive advertising in regard to pregnancy help organizations, and in our case, abortion pill reversal. And essentially saying that it is not true, and that everything that we talk about at our pregnancy center truth.com, that pregnancy centers have been dispelling the lies that you'll hear about later in this podcast for decades at this point from pro-abortion forces. We really wanted to be certain that we were acknowledging this new attack, that while the words may be the same, it is very targeted across states. So what we are seeing just since we recorded this podcast initially is an aggressive effort by pro-abortion lobbyists, pro-abortion politicians across the nation, utilizing deceptive advertising for headlines. I do want to go ahead and encourage you from the beginning, as you will hear throughout this podcast as well, that you are doing nothing wrong with the advertisements that you are doing, promoting pregnancy help, with abortion pill reversal. So we encourage you quite often, and we will continue to stay the course. We are moving ahead very positively. We are impacting lives. You are impacting lives within your communities. And so until something comes across that we are not able to defend in a proper way, which at this point we are very confident that we are, we encourage you to continue doing the jobs that you're doing. We are here for you. If you have any questions after listening to this podcast, you can absolutely reach out to any of us here at Heartbeat International, and we welcome the conversation, because again, we've been monitoring this from a national level, and at this point, we are very confident that everything that we have going on through our advertising online, through our websites, by following the commitment of care and competence, that we are doing good work in this world for these women, for these families. And we just want to encourage you that while we are feeling a little bit more pressure than we might have been a year or two ago, we are still doing great work through this mission. And so we want to convey that confidence to you and let you know that we are watching everything at this national level, and we are pushing back. So thank you for the work that you are doing, and enjoy the podcast.
All righty. Thanks so much, Andrea. And we'll jump right into this episode. You'll be hearing first from Jor-El Godsey.
Great to have our own team here. And I'm sure there's many folks from Heartbeat that could be in on this conversation, but we've got some of the best. And I want to kind of open with a story from ancient history, because I'm going to reference these things called the Yellow Pages, which, I have to tell my own kids, yes, this is a big book, actual Yellow Pages, and they would have no reference for this whatsoever. But back in the day, there were opportunities for pregnancy centers to advertise in the abortion section of the Yellow Pages, because it was available And then the abortion industry raised a big ruckus because the abortion was not a service that pregnancy centers provided. So they demanded of the Yellow Pages that they create their own section. And guess what's kind of fun about what happened is they created something called alternatives to abortion, or abortion alternatives, which actually came before abortion in the Yellow Pages. So if you're having to remember how to turn pages in a book, the what comes before was got access more often. And so what ended up happening, curiously, was that the pregnancy centers were getting seen before the abortion clinics were actually being seen in this idea of the Yellow Pages. And so this conversation about how and why and where pregnancy centers are supposedly allowed to be advertising and what they're allowed to advertise on is not a new conversation. It's been around for a while. In fact, Carolyn Maloney, who was a congressional representative out of the state of New York, for many, many years, basically had a bill that she called Stop Deceptive Advertising, which I think the first reference I can find to it was 2007. She brought it back in 2011, 2014. I mean, and she's been doing this for a long time. And it was actually based off of a report that best I can find that came out of the National Abortion Federation from 2006. So these things are not new. Now, what's new is that these laws actually are taking hold. And really what I want to talk about for the most part is the fact that these laws themselves are deceptive. They're painting a picture and telling a story as if this is a true thing, and it's something there's an abundance of supposedly deceptive advertising being done by pregnancy centers. And it's curious to me that this effort to kind of make this an issue has been around for 20 or more years, and yet it's kind of difficult to find an example. And I want to go back to a story that really comes to us out of Baltimore, where the Greater Baltimore Pregnancy Center was in a legislation for, I think it was for 8 or 9 years. And the ruling that they came out in 2018 had the Judge Wilkinson of the Fifth Circuit, so this has been appealed at the Fifth Circuit, stating this: after 7 years of litigation and a 1,295-page record before us, the city, meaning the city of Baltimore, does not identify, here's the money quote, a single example of a woman who entered the Greater Baltimore Center waiting room under the misimpression that she could obtain an abortion there. What the record does show is affirmative advocacy of abortion alternatives by a lawful nonprofit group. That is an amazing testimony by a judge who sat on that case, really reviewed all of the litigation, was called on to make a decision. And sorry, I think that's the Fourth Circuit. But that judge made that statement, and it just shows like this is the weakness of this conversation. And I think it underscores the fact that this most recent spate of laws against so-called deceptive advertising, or deceptive practices even are really without foundation. And so that's really one of the conversations I want to have. But even the way the law is constructed, I really want Danielle to weigh in on just because a law is written doesn't necessarily mean it's a good law.
Yeah, that's right. The method for making law in our country is a little more complicated than even the legislation part of it. They say that there are two things that you don't want to see being made: sausage and legislation. And that's true, but I would say I would even extend that legislation piece to just the law more broadly, because even after the legislative process, there's this whole secondary process of determining whether those laws that are enacted by the legislators can pass constitutional muster. And so the case that Jor-El just referenced is a great example of how simply because a legislative body passes a law doesn't mean that law is going to be able to stand. And what's interesting is we're seeing that the other side is very interested in passing these state laws or local ordinances, even despite the fact that they haven't been upheld in court. And one of the reasons that politically motivated actors might be looking to pass laws that they know or reasonably believe won't pass constitutional muster is that there's an incentive to silence organizations that might be intimidated by those laws. And so they know that they can attempt to force disfavored speakers to self-censor, to, if we don't know where the line is on whether I can say this thing or not say this thing, I better not say it. I better not say that because I don't know if I'm allowed to say it. And so even if the law is eventually struck down, there's a win if they can persuade pregnancy centers or those that they disagree with to simply not speak at all.
But doesn't, Danielle, that really challenge then really the fact that that's a law that can even be enforced? Like, isn't the fact that there isn't a clear understanding of what those terms mean part of what makes it a problem law?
Oh, absolutely. And there are a number of grounds for why a law could be struck down under First Amendment jurisprudence. But one of those is vagueness. If the law is too vague, then it's too difficult for people to know where the line is. And so then the court can say this law is vague, and that can be one of the reasons to strike it down. Another reason can be due to content-based and viewpoint discrimination. And this is an area of First Amendment law that's been developing favorably, in my opinion, over the last couple of decades. It used to be that the court said viewpoint discrimination was especially problematic, but they weren't necessarily convinced that content-based discrimination was problematic. And so I'll back up and maybe give an example of what that means. So a content-based regulation on speech would be, if you are speaking about abortion, then here are the regulations that apply. A viewpoint-based regulation might say, if you are speaking about abortion and you want to give a pro-life message, here are the regulations that apply. So that obviously is especially problematic if you have a law that applies only to one side of a contentious political issue like this. So it used to be that viewpoint discrimination was presumptively unconstitutional. Now the law has developed to where even a content-based regulation of speech is presumptively unconstitutional. So content-based meaning you have to know what the speech is in order to know whether it's constitutional or not. And so in Illinois, where there was recently a statute passed to try to curtail the speech of pregnancy centers, the judge there recognized that this was a content-based regulation of speech. And it's interesting to see the language that he used. He didn't mince any words. He says that the law is stupid. It is stupid because its own supporter admitted it was unneeded and was unsupported by evidence when challenged. And then he later said it's likely unconstitutional because it's a blatant example of government taking the side of whose speech is sanctionable and whose speech is immunized on the very same subject, no less. And so we have a winning record in challenging these types of content-based laws on how pregnancy centers may speak. The First Amendment comes in to protect the speech of pregnancy centers, particularly because these statutes are content-based and often viewpoint discriminatory.
That's certainly helpful, Danielle, because so often we see these laws and our first response is to look like, wait, what am I doing? And, how does this feel? And, you immediately start to look at yourself as to say, well, what things are happening? What am I doing? Which in fact is the intent of the law. Really, it's to put us on our heels in a sense, to make us even question our own practices, which frankly, our movement is doing. And we're having other discussions about, well, what does this mean? What does it mean to us? But more specifically, what does it mean in the legal perspective? So I appreciate you kind of helping us understand that these laws are not automatic. They really are subject to review, which is what we have to get to in some cases. And in some cases, that means we'll have this was a preliminary injunction, right? That by the Illinois judge. That meant it couldn't go into effect. They couldn't start enforcing it because there were some I think this was the one that had like $50,000 worth of fines or something that could have been enacted. So he basically stepped in and said, no, you can't do that, and here's why. And he had some, like you said, he didn't mince any words. He had some very strong statements. But internally, when we start to think about this from inside the center, Tracie, we really, you and I were talking last week about how this kind of plays out in a practical way in the center, and how it calls us really to have equipped staff members, team members who understand what we're advertising, what our services are, and how we communicate to our prospective clients as they call.
Well, a great way to do that is to beforehand, before we ever answer the telephone, is to make sure that we're properly trained and that we understand what is being asked and how we as an organization are going to respond to those type of questions. So there's training that centers do all the time. There's training in Heartbeats Academy it's called the Abortion Minded Caller, that centers can use to undergird and to make sure that they're ready and prepared. But the bottom line is to remember that we are telling the caller or those that are reaching out to us what we do. And we can be forthright and honest. There isn't, as we were accused of, or they're trying to accuse pregnancy centers of being deceptive, we need to make sure that fear doesn't drive how we answer the calls, because we are telling the caller and we're telling the client who we are and what we do. And as long as we stick to that, we do not have to worry about stepping off the path and putting ourselves in a place that we can be accused of doing anything wrong.
And this is where we often, in our conversations internally, within the movement, have gotten wrapped around discussing and portraying what we don't do versus what we are called to do. And so there certainly is wisdom. We want to have our disclaimers on our website. We want to make sure that we are properly contextualizing the messaging and not pretending that ads alone conveys our mission, our values, conveys all of our services. Because frankly, the advertising that's done today is done in bits and pieces as far as social media is concerned, or ads that are coming up in search. Those are not comprehensive ads. So I want to bring in Andrea as well, who's works with our marketing and with our advertising as well as our communications. And so she has and her team have been involved in some of that advertising. So Andrea, when we're presenting in those kind of spaces as far as our advertising and knowing what our services are behind that, what are some things that we need to make sure that we take a look at so we can be comfortable with our advertising and our messaging?
That's a great question, because first I want to delineate between the two in a way, because we have quite a presence within the pregnancy help movement, within each and every pregnancy center, the different audiences that we are speaking with. So we have our own media, that is our website, which is exactly where you were saying, Jor-El, we have our disclaimers and we have the information, Tracie, that you were saying, the services that we offer, this is what we do. So we have all of that, and that's what we should be putting out in our social media worlds as well. And then when you start to go into the paid advertising, paid media world, those are different rules, because of course, there are different social media companies that have different guidelines and community standards that we want to be mindful and aware of. But then, of course, with that, you add in the payment element to those social media companies and then search engines. And there are a lot of things that you just need to be certain that you have a clear understanding of. I know many of the pregnancy help organizations within the nation use a marketing company. We have a vast variety, a listing at our heartbeatservices.org life links list that gives you a lot of pro-life marketing companies that work specifically with pregnancy help, because this is ever evolving. So we understand that your job in the pregnancy help organization is to be with your clients and to work with your community and to provide those services, and not necessarily, not always, but not necessarily keep up to date on all the changes that Meta or Google or TikTok is implementing at the speed of light. So tap into your marketing companies if you are using them. If not, contact us. If you have somebody on your staff, a very skilled person who this is their heart and following what is working with your audiences and what messages to put out. connect with us and we can work with some ads for you or with you to answer those questions of, is this going against anything? I got this message that they're going to shut down my whole site if I do this, and navigating how to provide effective ads in the variety of locations that communicate what you do well and how to reach your potential client. We are in a space where we are targeting the same exact demographic as the abortion clinics and as Planned Parenthood and other healthcare providers. And we should not jump and run from that. A lot of what Danielle was talking about with the laws, and Jor-El, you were talking about earlier, with the people suing or politicians coming out and talking, a lot of it is a PR campaign to scare pregnancy centers from entering spaces. And that's something that we need to not give into. We need to not give into the fear. These women need to know about pregnancy help. They need to see the services and they need to be reached in effective ways. So as long as you are promoting your services, what you do, staying up to date on as much as you can, either by tapping into your marketing company, asking them the questions along the way as to how effective your ads are being. And you're going to be seeing those clients come through the door and making those phone calls, but asking those questions of your company so that you have those answers of effectiveness. And then staying on top of what your staff knows. Going back to what Tracie was talking about, being prepared. When you answer those calls, making sure that your organization and all the staff within are up to date as to how to answer these key questions that typical clients ask, and then maybe some atypical clients for those hard questions as well. We have been following, as Jor-El mentioned, that the PR campaign against pregnancy help is nothing new. We've been following it since the 90s, if not before. I was a teenager then, so probably not as much, but we've been navigating this. So we have put together a site called pregnancycentertruth.com that actually helps push back against some of this narrative that we've been seeing over the years. It's just been evolving in different ways. But when your supporters are asking questions, or you don't know what to answer for your new volunteer who's asking, well, why is this person saying this about our pregnancy center? Is it okay? You can tap into pregnancycentertruth.com and get some of these answers, because again, it's nothing new. We have witnessed it for years. This talks about lies against pregnancy centers in general and lies against abortion pill reversal, because that is one key thing that has been targeted and silenced in certain realms, specifically Google. Meta's under a pressure campaign as well against allowing any advertising for abortion pill reversal. That may be a service that you offer. And that is a service that if you do offer, you should tout. You should list it in your owned media, on your website, in your social media. You may not be able to advertise it, but it is something that you should be proud of. It is effective. We're seeing those women, and it's a service that you provide. So as we navigate those, you can answer those questions to your supporters and your staff. Again, pregnancycentertruth.com, as well as pregnancyhelpnews.com for stories and legislative updates, because we are intentionally staying on top of this as Heartbeat International, because your work is in the center. Your work is with those women and families in your community. And our job is to navigate the chaos within the courts and provide you with the information that may be useful and helpful for what you have at your centers, what you may need to implement, what you shouldn't worry about. And if new state laws come into play, we're trying to stay as on top of that as possible and get you that info as quickly as possible when it may impact either your center or your marketing efforts.
So thanks, Andrea. The idea that you've leaned into was we advertise our services truthfully. That's absolutely certain. If we've been really walking under this and working under this idea of a national standard of ethical practices, and that's called our commitment of care and competence. So one of the things I would recommend, as Tracie mentioned earlier about making sure that your team is trained, is we have something in our academy called Raising the Standard, which many centers use to onboard their staff, their volunteers. And that idea of raising the standard, what does it mean? How does it work? How do we walk through it and abide by that is an important function really for the movement. And we've had that around for now for actually many, many years. And the core phrase there, the core tenet that is referred to regarding this discussion is that all of our advertising communication are truthful and honest and accurately describe the services we offer, which is exactly what we want to do. Now, we understand that the other side keeps pushing out this narrative that we're not doing that, and yet they still have failed to find any meaningful examples or legitimate examples, as these judges have themselves reviewed. And there's also this idea that we should always have disclaimers about what we don't do. So Danielle, I want to just have you remind us really what's good about our disclaimers, why those are important, even though it's not something that is required of any other industry. It certainly is something that has become a focus on for us to be mindful of.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, there isn't really a legal requirement that we would have a disclaimer on our website. And in fact, I would note that for the organizations that are most upset about the work that we're doing, putting a disclaimer on the website, even that isn't enough. But having a disclaimer on the website that lets the visitor know that the services that are available to her at the center and then the services that are not available can be very, very helpful. It's interesting. I was just reviewing some case law from the 80s today in preparation for this podcast. And even in a case in the 80s where the judge was evaluating whether the center was engaged in deceptive trade practices, the judge explicitly stated that it was not necessary and that it was overly burdensome for a center to have to immediately disclaim abortion every time they say the word abortion. So
wait, that was from the 80s, right? That was from the 80s. That's before Google.
For internet.
Yeah, I think that's when we still did advertising on stone tablets and such, right? That's like Flintstones era.
It's ancient history. But the notion or the concept stands that, the abortion industry does not have a monopoly on the term abortion. A woman who's seeking abortion is looking for a solution to what she perceives to be a problem. And we have a solution to offer her. We can add disclaimers to the website that can be tastefully done and still awaken hope in her that maybe what this answer that she's just frantically looking for, maybe there's an alternative that is available to her that won't be so painful for her.
And isn't that really the case when we talk, and particularly Tracie, when we talk about her mindset when she's reaching out? This is the kind of the underlying messaging of the abortion industry and the abortion politicians, or those that are frankly are bought and paid for by big abortion. They're the ones that are trying to maintain this reality, like she deserves an abortion, she wants an abortion, nothing should prevent her from getting an abortion, when the truth of the kind of woman that we are encountering has literally nothing to do with that kind of lofty picture that's presented as if she's showing up demanding her rights. It's like, that is totally not the case. She's in a desperate place. And Tracie, you've seen that over and over again in the center.
Right. Absolutely. And, and even for the woman that says, but that's what I'm here for today, I think it's important to understand that there are things happening in her life in the vacuum that she's in that are not controllable by outside forces. We do not know who all she's talked to on the phone. She may have called abortion clinics. She may have called her local health department. She may have called and been asking a lot of questions, and my pregnancy center ends up being the one that she comes walking through the door. And there's a lot of information out there that's become confusing because there's so much. I know one of the issues that I found about in the last community that I served in is people in that community, because they were uninformed and didn't go and find out more about the pregnancy center I was with, there were people that thought it was an abortion clinic, not because of our messaging, because of their assumptions. And so, if I had a young lady come through the door and go, but I thought you did abortions, a lot of times I would ask, why? And when I would ask why, they would go, well, because my aunt said that I could come here. Well, that's not on my messaging. That has nothing to do with anything I'm putting out there. There is someone that's from the outside the organization that is speaking into her life. But Jor-El, you're right. The majority coming through the door, coming into the pregnancy center, are not coming in there demanding an abortion. That isn't even their expectation. They're coming through looking for resources, help, and support. And that is something that pregnancy help centers do a phenomenal job of providing their communities.
Yeah. And one of the things that when she's walking into the door, she certainly may think she needs an abortion, but we know that she hasn't probably explored any of the other options. She hasn't looked at any of the other potential pathways. We learned, ages ago that the idea of a crisis tends to narrow her perspective to only see things in a certain way. So somehow expecting like all of our practices are going to have to disclaim abortion at every turn reminds me of what that judge said, back in the ancient days, as Danielle would put it, in the 80s, where that even that's not to be expected. That's too much. And that was back in the day when, advertising wasn't even 140 characters in a text, or was a little more, could be a little more involved as far as print and publishing. But it's important to be mindful that we are after good practices that serve her and help her make an informed decision. And I would contend that, and I wrote an article about this, that essentially the other side is the one that's being so much more deceptive. They are laying claim to the abortion term. They are suggesting and basically providing only abortion in their services. They don't, even the vaunted Planned Parenthood doesn't actually provide anything for, planned parenting. So it's like that's if anyone's being deceptive in their practices and in how they're named, it feels to me like that's the brand that's doing it more than pregnancy centers are. Pregnancy centers are truly here to help women walk through that abortion decision. And we know that what happens is not all of them make the choice to not have an abortion, whereas the other side is more than, I think it's, the last I saw was like 93% of pregnant women that walk through the doors of a Planned Parenthood will walk out without their child. So it's, if anything, this feels like a massive case of projection, which is, I find very common upon the pregnancy centers, when it's exactly what big abortion has been doing. And I appreciate, Danielle, you said something earlier that they're not entitled to the term abortion, as if it's theirs because they are providing it. Speak to that a little more.
Yeah, we know from talking to women who have experienced abortion that a lot of times women feel like abortion is my only option. It was my only choice. Of course, she's going to Google abortion if she thinks that's her only option. Why wouldn't a pregnancy center be able to recognize that what she's looking for in that term, she may not actually be seeking. She's looking for a solution to a problem. The name to that solution for her is abortion because she thinks it's her only option. And so if we can speak her language, then we can present other options to her. And the abortion industry doesn't get to preclude pro-life people from even uttering the word abortion.
That's an excellent point. And it's something that I encountered years ago. And it's like someone said to me, it's like, imagine a library where the only thing allowed in the library was about slavery was written by those that were involved in the slave trade. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like even today, 150 years later, we think that's crazy. Like, who would allow that? But that's exactly kind of the posturing and positioning some of these laws and the legislators behind it are suggesting, is that no, the only people that get to own that term, whether it's in marketing or in the political process, are those that are providing that so-called product. And so I appreciate that kind of calling out that as a distinction. And I love how you put that, like, she sees that as the answer, but she doesn't know any other answers. And so we're really trying to reach into that decision. I equate that to some things that are probably more familiar to us today. Can you imagine someone trying to run a Gamblers Anonymous, or Alcoholic Anonymous or smoking cessation without using the product names that are involved in any of those. Like they couldn't do it, and that's, I think that's intentional of the pro-abortion side to kind of push us away from the term, box us out from being able to use the term, when it's exactly that term that brings her to that moment of saying, I need something, I need some help in my life to make a decision going forward. And so that's why we not only shouldn't shy away from it, we should be actively engaging the term in a truthful way. You know, we're not gonna tell her we're providing abortions, because we don't, and that's not something that we're going to do. But it's something that we need to make sure that we're engaging in our marketing so that we can be effective in reaching her.
And I wanted to add to that because you were mentioning how to get utilizing words, and words, if you have not been following it, has been quite a very intricate piece of this censorship element online. So we've known from just working in this for so long with different social media companies and digital advertising that as we enter election seasons as well, the social media companies specifically really hone in on that word abortion as a social issue for both sides of this issue. So it, as much as we feel it because we're living it, it is a reality that I will say the further extremes of the abortion industry, they are feeling it too, because they're not allowed to advertise certain words. If you look at the advertisements that they do, anything that has captions, all of a sudden that word abortion is blacked out, even though they'll say it in the verbiage and such. But it is a trigger word that AI is taught and looking for. So it is something to be mindful of.
So that cuts both ways, is what you're saying.
Yes. And it is something that is like, we're living it, so we feel it a lot. But know that the other side is feeling it too on certain elements. That's why abortion pill reversal, we can't advertise it, but they can't advertise abortion pills. Now, again, it's words. So they will find other ways to advertise it and get that word out there. Some of these organizations who are very adamantly abortion activists will use incredibly deceptive means. So there is a reason to have these laws that we already have on the books about deceptive advertising. To your point, Jor-El, they already exist and should be sought out. But as we move forward, continuously sharing our services and what we do in truthful, honest ways, according to our commitment of care and competence, just know that Meta and TikTok and anywhere that you may be advertising, they're going to have stricter rules in the 2024 year for US because of the elections, where we get all sorts of lovely disclaimers. It's nothing against us. I mean, it is, but it's nothing against us specifically as pregnancy help organizations. It's the abortion social issue that they start to really hone in on. So just stay true to the services that you're offering, and make sure that you're utilizing your own media to get your services and that community involvement out. But just a note that that's coming within the next year.
So thanks for that kind of clarity on that. So that just calls us back to make sure that we do what we know has been effective, what effectively connects us with the woman who's in that place of making a decision about her unintended pregnancy, involving that child within her. Those are the women that we want to serve. So we shouldn't step back from that, knowing that this is a bigger issue. This is a political issue. And in fact, it's going to be a huge issue in this upcoming election, as it has been in recent ones and some in the past. But it's going to be one of those things where we still have to be, as you said, Andrea, true to what we're doing. We need to hold to the fact, as Danielle reminded us about, the fact that the other side doesn't get to own this themselves, that we have a right to speak into this. And as Tracie reminded us, that it's important to really meet her where she's at, understand that this may be something that she is looking for, but isn't convinced of. And that's exactly who we want to be. Where the other side, the abortion industry, wants to capture her and then sell her an abortion. They want to make that. I think that's clear in the stat I gave earlier, when there are those that are presenting in abortion clinics or on abortion websites now. And of course, the other side's doing a ton of things to eliminate any other expectation that she would have other than abortion, almost as if almost as if it's her responsibility to get an abortion, which is, I think, itself is undercutting the joy of creation, the power of a creator, and the beauty that God has placed within all women as far as for womanhood and for the gift of childbearing, which of course I'm on a call with all moms, so that's an easy message. So I'm within a friendly and familiar crowd. But it's one of those things where we have to realize, like, this is for the greater good of our, not just that individual, that she get an option besides abortion, but it's a greater good for our community, for our culture, for our country, and certainly for our world. So wherever this is happening and however we're dealing with this, we need to remain truthful to what we do and how we serve, and we need to be mindful that this is a big issue, and we can weigh into this and do so effectively with confidence. Any last thoughts from our team?
Don't stop. Because I know there's a lot out there, and there's, again, it's this major campaign of repeating the lies over and over. But what work is being done through Pregnancy Help is literally life-saving. So don't give in to the fear.
Well, and actually, that's something I think Danielle touched into it, was that is the one thing that will make the other side leave us alone, is if we stop, if we give up, if we quit. Short of that, they don't want us to exist. Like, I don't, it's hard to understand how we really take direction from them. I mean, they believe some of the weirdest things. They don't believe it's a human. They don't believe that it's worth, the baby's worth protecting. They certainly don't trust women to make a better decision. They don't believe in the fact that women can overcome amazing things. They're not even sure what a woman is at times. In some of the conversations we get with some of the politicians, and even one of the justices that's now on Supreme Court. So, like, why are they to be trusted with what is true and evident practices, and we are not? We're the ones that have been faithfully serving women, helping them make a choice for life, and as they're in the valley of decision. And it's evidenced by the fact that when we have served a woman, we see it in the exit interviews. We constantly see that we've championed them, and they recognize it. They come back with 95, 96, 97, 98% satisfaction rates of saying, yes, I was served well, and I would recommend these services to others. And that's the part that the deceptive ads are being deceptive about. They're trying to pretend that there's some massive group of people that have been deceived into making decisions they didn't truly want. And if that exists, it is not on the pregnancy center side. It's on the side of those that have basically profiteered abortions upon women. And so that if anyone's being deceptive, it's certainly not us. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to work with such great esteemed colleagues, and appreciate your contribution to this, Danielle and Andrea and Tracie, and I'll turn it back to you, Christine.
Thank you. It's always great to have each of you on the podcast, but I think it's the most fun when we get all of you together. So this has been really great, really informative and helpful. And I think each of you had some sort of link to share of a Heartbeat resource or something that we can share with listeners. So check out the show notes. I'll have some highlights from the episode from this discussion, and I will link to the things that were mentioned that will be helpful for listeners. So with that, be sure to subscribe so that we can keep new information coming your way. And thanks for listening to this episode of the Pregnancy Help Podcast.